morning and welcome to Practical Christian Lessons. I'm Joshua Pearsall, and today we are going to be talking about the perspicuity of Scripture. Specifically, if the Scriptures are clear, why is there so much division? And that's an important question, and this doctrine is an important doctrine. It's been an important doctrine since the founding of the church, and since before then. But it's especially important in the Reformation, and still important today. It is still one of the hotly debated topics between those who disagree with it, whether they're Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, whatever, and us in our various Protestant traditions, whether you're a Baptist, Methodist, Lutheran, Anglican, etc. Because we're not all the same tradition, and that's going to matter a lot in this video. So part of what we're addressing here today, Joe Heschmeyer is probably the recent voice that has had a few videos, and it's caused quite a stir, not necessarily over what he has said, but over interactions around what he has said. And he has challenged the perspicuity of Scripture. This isn't the first time he's done this. He's been working with Catholic answers for a long time. This is what they do. And one of his pointed critiques was at, and this is something you'll see a lot of apologists do as a whole, is they'll just say Protestants do this, and they don't differentiate between the different groups. And when I pressed Joe Heschmeyer on this myself, and other people have as well, he said, I'm aware, but I'm challenging you guys as a whole because you all hold to perspicuity and sola scriptura. And that was part of why he made the bold claim. And we're not going to be addressing all his points in this video. I'm not interested in that. But his claim, and one that was echoed in the Reformation by the Counter-Reformers, especially by figures like Eck, Johann Eck, if you don't know who that is, he was a very loud, slanderous Counter-Reformer. Very slanderous in his accusations. But this thing, you guys can't agree on everything, therefore you're wrong. That's sort of the gist of the argument. As Heschmeyer says, the essentials. And if you go back and watch our first video on where we define what perspicuity is, as Joe Heschmeyer puts it, the essentials, and Eck did this, and I could rattle off dozens of others. That's just that I'm aware of. I'm sure there's probably hundreds, if not more, who have made that same type of statement. That was never something we claimed. The doctrine of perspicuity is that which is necessary for salvation, and righteous living is clear in the Scriptures. And if you're going to critique Protestants on whether or not they agree on things, you need to critique a particular tradition one at a time. Saying a Baptist and a Methodist don't agree on something is like saying a Roman Catholic and an Eastern Orthodox don't agree on something. And we're going to get into this, and I've got my whole little script ready. But I'm going to open up with a quote from St. Irenaeus from his work Against Heresies. If you're not aware of what this work is, this is a super important work in the early church, and he was battling against the Gnostic heresy. And part of their claims, and his critiques of their claims, was that they claimed to have a secret, oral, infallible tradition that only they had passed down from the apostles. Sound familiar? That wasn't written down and not preserved in writ. Irenaeus' counter to this claim was to say that no, the revelation given by the apostles is public. It is that which is recorded in the Scriptures. Whether by mouth or by writing, it is the same deposit of faith that was delivered. It's all the same content. That was his claim. Some people will maybe want to argue on that. That's what we're putting forth. And if you read the work yourself, it seems to be pretty clear that is his statement. This is him responding, is a sort. When, however, they, being in this case Gnostics, but any other heretical group, are confuted from the Scriptures, they turn around and accuse these same Scriptures as if they were not correct, nor of authority, and assert that they were ambiguous, and that the truth cannot be extracted from them by those who are ignorant of tradition. For they allege that the truth was not delivered by means of written documents, but via voice. Viva voice, if you read it in the original. Wherefore, or from the translation I'm reading from, wherefore also Paul declared, but we speak wisdom among those that are perfect, but not the wisdom of this world. And this is from Book 3, Chapter 2. So the response of those he is critiquing is to say that the Scriptures are not correct. I'm sure we've heard that in sort of our modern or postmodern world. Nor of authority, a claim we also deal with today. And then this one, they are ambiguous. Who asserts that today? Well, we're getting into that. So, before we get into this, despite what figures like Joe Heschmeyer and many others, we nor the Reformers claim we can solve all dissensions, all disagreements with the perspicuity of Scripture or sola scriptura. Heschmeyer is simply one recent voice in a long line of voices not worth listening to, repeating the same arguments that have been made since the Reformation. His claim, if the Protestant view of Scripture is correct, sincere believers will agree on the essential doctrines, is exactly just that. The claim of him and many others who have been attacking this idea, which we do not claim ourselves. Just as we do not claim man is guided by Scripture alone as he has been, or at the very least is in the running for, the most common strawman since the times of slanderous counter-reformer Johann Eck. Luther and others made extreme claims in the beginning of the Reformation, their own overreaction to what they were dealing with, but they all made such claims and came to realize they had been too extreme and too hasty. But if you read a lot of those writings, like Heschmeyer and Eck and others, quote Luther from Bondage on the Will, talking about how the Scriptures are so clear. In that same work, he also talks about how there are parts of Scripture that are hard to understand and obscure, and you need the clearer parts of Scripture to help you read it. That is Scripture interpreting Scripture. Go watch our first video. That's in completely line with that. And that is something Heschmeyer didn't quote from the same work. He quoted Luther in one of his videos. Eck did this. I don't know if Bellarmine did this. Another very notable and much better counter-reformer to be reading to get a handle on good arguments. But this was a claim made a lot where they would take one quote from Luther or another and then ignore another quote that was very relevant to the discussion at hand and just say, hey, so you said this, we can't do this, this is absurd. And Luther would be like, yeah, I also said this. Luther had some other flavorful words said in there. Luther and other, I'll skip forward, made these claims, but all who made such claims came to realize they had been too extreme in some of these statements and too hasty, as anyone tends to be in any sort of situation where you are suddenly swinging from one extreme thing that you see a bunch of errors. Your tendency is to swing into the other opposite extreme. It happens all the time in our own world. People often, I do this all the time, you have to stop yourself and then say, okay, I'm being a little hasty here. I need to slow down. I need to move more towards the center and evaluate what's actually going on here. What has become the official teaching of our various traditions, because we are not the same traditions, is what is to be evaluated. That which we trace to the early church, not the various single voices of theologians in their extreme statements, which they themselves even temper down, often in the same writing that is quoted. No one should do this to any single tradition. It would be unfair to evaluate all of Rome by many single statements made throughout the years. Saying we cannot all agree on the essentials is attacking a claim we have not made. Now, I will grant in one way this critique is valid, as it points to a very serious failure in the modern church as a whole. However, this is not simply an error of the various Protestant traditions within the Protestant umbrella. And often this is far more an issue in American and Western cultures than other places around the world, such as Singapore, where there are 4 main Protestant traditions that are extremely friendly and cooperative, even worshiping in the same building. But in another, not in the same building, in the same room on Sundays, or on the Lord's Day. I think they're in a slightly different time zone from us, so Sunday for me, I'm not sure if Sunday for them. But in another very serious way, I grant this critique as valid. We live in a fallen world. We simply do not understand everything perfectly, and this leads to people making genuine errors. In Numbers 11:24-30, when Moses anoints the 70, others start prophesying, and Joshua wants Moses to stop them, possibly having in mind the incident with Korah. Yet Joshua was in the wrong, and we see a similar incident with the disciples, where they try to stop people who are exorcising demons, and Jesus says, don't stop them. If they are for us, they are not against us. And in Deuteronomy 1, verses 30 and 32, we see one of many instances where Moses berates the Israelites for failing to hold to the clear truth that the Lord will fight for them, as Moses points to the Exodus as the proof that God will keep his promise. That is, they're going into the promised land, the Lord will fight for them. They will triumph over their enemies. A promise and clear instruction given to them directly from God. And we are to think we will not do the same in our own day. What of Saul, who gets impatient in 1 Samuel 3, 7 through 14, and he breaks Samuel's clear instructions, where he goes to offer a sacrifice without Samuel? And when Samuel confronts him, his answer was not, "I did not understand." He tried to justify his action. Or in John's own gospel, where he tells us people took Christ's words to mean that he, being John, would not die before the second coming. And John points out that is not what Jesus said. Surely the people were not sinning in this thought, even though they were still wrong. And I know some people in the comments on the last video brought this up as a critique of the video, even though that wasn't my point, that wasn't what I was talking about, is a lot of reasons people stray from the scriptures. That was what that video was about. This wasn't about dissensions, is because of sinfulness or rebellion against the Lord. And some of the questions were, all right, well, why are there all these disagreements? Is everyone just sinning? I should have been clear in the comments as well. That's my apologies. That was not the point of that video. That is the point of this video, is talk about why there are dissensions among Christians who are being genuine, who are searching the scriptures, who are following the Lord, who are not just simply in sin in their errors here. Certainly in their disagreements, not errors, in their disagreements. Back to this. And I have another simple response to this critique. Yes, and. If this disproves us who accept the perspicuity of Scripture, where we admit we can be in error and acknowledge that we often are, even if we are unaware of it, which is our own fault, not the fault of the Scriptures. If this defeats us, then most surely the gates of hell have prevailed, for amongst the Ecclesialists too there are rank dissensions, and they claim to have the infallible authority of the church. So how can there be disagreements between them if they are infallible? To list but a fraction of the dissensions. Should Protestant Bibles be burned? Should we as Protestants be rebaptized, or even of other ecclesiastic traditions? So if a Roman Catholic becomes an Eastern Orthodox, do they need to be rebaptized, and vice versa? Can Protestants be saved? Can the different ecclesialist traditions be saved? Right? There was a long period of time where Rome and the East just told each other that they can't be saved, and some still do today. Is original sin true? Rome says yes. Dositheus in the Synod of Jerusalem in 1672 said yes, a pan-Orthodox synod. While most modern theologians say no, at least in America, they to their own council, they say it erred. A council that has extreme authority, and they say it's wrong. The same council that is used often to challenge perspicuity of Scripture. Dositheus challenges it in his confession that is accepted by the Synod. What of the Roman Catholics to the Eastern Orthodox and the anathemas of the past millennia, or the Oriental Orthodox, or the others? Russia cries anathema, while the Greeks say we are brothers who are simply lacking in the fullness of the faith to us as Protestants. The Council of Trent pronounced damnation on the schismatics, while the Vatican now calls us separated brethren. What doctrine has caused more schism than the papacy, that tore the East from the West, and then the West from the West? How does one define what an anathema is? How does one define what makes a council ecumenical? Are toll houses dogmatic or heresy? Are the Orientals only divided by semantics or a true division in theology? Is the seat of Peter empty or not? There are even those who would divide over a calendar when the church long ago faced a similar problem with the date of Easter. Are the holy orders of each other's traditions valid or not? To spare my hand and you, the audience, who has been so patient, we will simply stop there. There has already been countless books written to address this. Javier Perdomo's videos, which I will have in the cards at the end of this video, address this as well. I think it's been sufficiently demonstrated that the depth of hypocrisy in this attack against truth is there. This is not a good critique. In this critique, we both either fall together or neither of us are defeated, and we must look elsewhere to settle the matter. This is no two-quote way. Either the gates have prevailed or the critique fails. The tomb is empty. I know my answer. Because Christianity is true, we cannot use an argument that just cuts off each other's heads. So, hopefully, I've managed to keep this short. I was worried this would be a longer video. I'll put links in the comments as well to the 3 videos in question. But Javier Perdomo has a video just going through and showing many disagreements between those in the same tradition, whether Rome and Rome or East and East, or between them to each other. And the point of his videos, and I want to just point out here as well, is if you're going to critique someone, it needs to be of the same group. If you're going to critique Lutherans for disagreeing, you need to critique just Lutherans. You don't need to bring in someone as Heschmeyer's done, as Trent Horn has done in the past, as others have done. Don't compare a Unitarian, well, 1, to Christians in general. Unitarians aren't Christians. But 2, don't compare them to Protestants of any tradition, whether that's Baptist or Methodist. And then 3, don't compare them to Protestants as a whole. It's already an error to try and compare Protestants as a whole in most situations. But then to sit there and compare a Unitarian who just isn't even a Christian to any of the groups. If you're going to critique a tradition, you need to critique that specific tradition. You need to critique the Baptist for the mistakes of the Baptist, the Methodist for the mistakes of the Methodist, the Anglicans for the Anglicans, the Roman Catholics for the Roman Catholics. You don't try to cross-compare them. That is a bad faith and disingenuous argument, which Joe Heschmeyer admits in his own video, and others have admitted, right? If you take, say, a Mormon and compare them to a Roman Catholic, they're like, that's a bad faith argument. An Eastern Orthodox Roman Catholic, that's a bad faith argument. Yes, that's our entire point. That's what we've been trying to say, is that is a terrible way to try and argue something. And the reason you can't use arguments like this or do comparisons like that is because we all agree Christianity is true. The tomb was empty. Christ is resurrected. He is Lord and he has risen. And because of that, one of us has to be speaking the truth on how epistemology works, on how the scriptures are clear or not clear in areas or as a whole, on the place of tradition. One of us has to be right. And doing an argument that just cuts off both our heads just then leaves us in a situation where we know nothing. It's an absolute absurdity. And I will have plenty of arguments on how, in the future, on how we can be clear even when there are disagreements, because I don't even need to make a whole video on that. I can just say a quick statement. We have all had situations where a statement was clear and most people got it. Or I assume most people have had this situation. And then someone misunderstood a part of it or took it the wrong way. That happens. We're people. It's not that big a deal. It's a part of life. But that's part of why the scriptures have never been addressed like as an individual, right? This me, myself, and my Bible under a tree mentality is very novel. It's very new. The scriptures have always been approached as a book to be read within community, as a body, as a single body. As Paul says in 1 Corinthians 10, as there is one bread, there is one body, right? We're supposed to do this together. And that's helps us stress these things. But we're still people, and we're still flawed, and we still miss things, and we still misunderstand things. It happens. And I will end there before I do make this a 30-minute video. You guys have a wonderful day. God bless, and hopefully this settles some big questions for you guys.